Hey, good morning, everybody. At Cat and at Ron, I'm not going to stay up here and say that I'm a socioeconomic expert and I'm not a psychiatrist, psychologist. My original business venture with Japan was twofold. I wanted to launch my travel business and do tours of Japan, as well as invest in real estate before the 2020 Olympics. We all know COVID happened and the world went to crap, and my investors backed out. So several of the properties when I was by myself with the Japanese real estate agent that I was referred to, a few of the properties had what you call a medical move out. And it wouldn't go into details. It was all in Japanese anyway. So one of the properties, which was about 16 stops away from Shinjuku Station to the more of the Sitagawa area, you could look through the windows and you could see that the personal effects of the person that lived there were still there. It was a gentleman. Um, he had very little belongings, but a lot of it was still there. So the thing that stood out to me the most was the bookcase with all the manga on it. And it wasn't new manga, it was old manga. We're talking the late 90s, early 2000s manga that were just nicely, neatly stacked on the shelf. And there was a coffee mug on the table, and there was a coffee pot on the table that hadn't looked like it hadn't been moved. We did not have keys to access the inside of the property, but the lady that I was working with said that medical move outs could have mean they were unable to take care of themselves and they were collected to go to a retirement home, or their relatives had come for them, or they had died. It was one of those three, whether it was medical, retirement home, or their family came to collect them. It was a medical move out. So the reason why I'm doing a YouTube video, I'm not trying to generate any traffic, but it's very easy for you to click the links below. And there's several articles about the depopulation of Japan. The number one reason why hikikomori, and hikikomori means shut in, whether it's emotional, social, or just mental breakdown shut in. Japan did itself dirty in the late 80s to the early 2000s. You literally have a generation of our age bracket, and we're talking as young as 36 all the way up to 59, that literally went to high school, got the grades, went to college, graduated in the top 20, 30 of their class, and then started working and then were just let go because Japan had a bubble economy explosion. Like, well, let's call it implosion, not making fun of the sub, but let's call it what it is. Um, it didn't work out. So you literally had people that were stuck in the social dynamic of Japan. And the social dynamic of Japan that a lot of people don't get is that it closely emulates Detroit and Motor City loyalty boom of the 60s and 70s, meaning that the longer you stayed, the bigger your pension. Meaning that you would have people that would finish high school or college and work for one company for their entire professional adult career and have money coming in. Japan's early corporate rebuild after World War II is pretty much the same model, meaning that you would have men that would give 50 to 60 years to a company and then retire like fat cats, making more than new people would starting a company and giving the same amount of time. It was a very unbalanced system. So just imagine you finished high school, you finished college, you didn't go to the military, and you went to this corporation that you were either a legacy hire or this company only hired from your university, only after 18 to 24 months to be fired. And to give you the mindset difference of most Japanese young men at the time, that was like being shot in the chest and left bleeding open on the street. Even though you're not going to die, we're just going to leave you out here for everyone to be a social outcast. So my experience as an ALT with hikikomori is that I had students that would be embarrassed by the teacher in front of the class, and they wouldn't come back to class. Like the teacher, and just so you know, sarcasm does exist in Japan, and it's very effing brutal. And it's very subtle. It's not outright like in the West. It's not like, hey, we fire off a joke, everyone gets it, and we all laugh. No, Japanese sarcasm is a very sharp knife that cuts deep to the soul. And perfect example is that I had a young lady who was at the top of the English levels in my school. And when I say at the top, she could have a full-blown conversation in English and never have to pick up a Genji Jisho, which is electronic dictionary, ever. She was perfectly fine the entire time. Like, I think her parents had sent her to an English camp in Australia or New Zealand for a summer when she was young. So she corrected one of the math teachers who said something smart in English, and the teacher struck her. So me at 25, 26, I'm like, why the hell did you just hit this child? You just slapped her in front of the class. You really crossed the line, and I was ushered into the principal's room, and I was told to calm down and not overreact and not flip out. Needless to say, this young lady didn't come back. And the teacher did not receive a reprimand that I ever saw. Like, I never saw any write-up. I was never involved. I'm not a principal, so I would never be involved in the process of discipline. Needless to say, the teacher stayed, student left. I'm glad she left. I hope she found a better school, but this was 2006. So she's way past high school, and I hope she's having a beautiful, successful life. But the after effects of that is that two of her classmates she was really close to transferred schools. And the problem with Japan is that instead of having district lines where everyone in the neighborhood comes to your school because they don't have a choice based on location, in Japan, everyone has a choice. So when you have teachers with negative reputations that are running around hitting kids or being unruly or disrespectful, Japanese principals either bury those stories and kill the rumors, or they move the teacher along for greener pasture. Because in Japan, what keeps your school open is enrollment. Kids show up during American spring break to take tests to get into school. And I know that's good, steering somewhat off topic, but it's the same way with companies. Kids in Japan from the late 70s to, I want to say, the early 2000s, their whole career, adult life, was driven by what school they attended, graduated from, would be recruited into what company. After the LiveDoor scandal, the internet.com implosion, and a whole bunch of other scandals at the corporate level, we're not talking about government, we're just talking about the business world alone. Japan broke the train on which is economic success with writing. You don't have to agree with me. You can research it yourself. There's plenty of YouTube channels that will walk you through it step by step. There's several in the link below. But the number one issue for this generation, our generation in the same timeline in Japan and a generation coming up, is that for every high-paying job in America, there's 150 people applying, if not 150,000 people applying, if we're talking about the stock market in New York. In Japan, triple that number, because you have people that graduated with degrees that never got a chance to work. Plus, you have up-and-coming people that want a long company life so they can retire. Here's the catch-22 for Japan. Retirement age has already had 10 years added to the goalpost. Here's the scary part. You have jobs in Japan where people that graduated from college in the late 60s to early 70s have just become upper management at the company that they've been at forever. I don't know what they're drinking or what they're eating, but they live forever. So that's another deterrent for people joining older, more established companies in Japan, because you still got the management that is effectively their great grandparents running the show. Japan has a nasty reputation for the old goats that don't die still making decisions, especially impacting technology that should be propelling them forward to continue being the leading edge. Well, Japan, you failed the test. And that's in every aspect of industry. The people that are 45, 50 that have come up with cell phones and social media, that have the experience to make executive decisions to move companies forward, aren't getting that respect. They're not getting the chance to make those managerial decisions to move any company forward. So, and here's an example that will make sense. Japan will remix, rewash, rehash, and redo anything that's successful. Final Fantasy, Pokemon, Digimon, Dragon Ball Z. Anything that was popular from the 1960s to the early 2000s, even into the 20 teens, will get recycled, rehashed, rewashed, redone, because Japan still has a super terrifying hesitation of anything new is scary. And if anything new is scary, then that means that it's not going to happen. And that's just what it is. So mental health is a joke in the West, but it is now becoming a front page or dinner table conversation in Japan, because they've literally emotionally and socioeconomically castrated a whole generation of men and women that are now too old to work, or if they are working, can only work in limited capacities. And then we have to do something with the reality of bodies. So when we get into the stories and the articles linked below, yes, Japan is going to recruit from Brazil, because that's the largest demographic of Japanese outside of Japan. Problem is the Brazilian Japanese. So their traditional values are 4 generations removed. And yeah, real estate in Japan is going to fluctuate in the next 10 to 15 years. The problem that I've seen after watching a lot of socioeconomists and culturalists and businesses, that the Japan, if you've been to Japan in the past 30 years, at least once, that Japan will not be Americanized. It'll be Westernized, because a lot of Western cultures will finally be able to afford real estate in Japan and move. And the old goats in government are fighting tooth and nail to prevent that from happening. But they haven't put any major blocks on people buying real estate in Japan. The number one thing keeping all of the people that they're scared of from living in Japan permanently is the fact that with a tourist visa, you can only live in Japan for 6 months. And it's very expensive to buy a residency visa. It's very expensive to start a business in Japan. But without new blood and new influence of children, life, and ideas, Japan is on its deathbed anyway. So enjoy it while it's still there. And I'm not trying to be dark, ignore the black shirt and the black and white background, but I'm trying to give you a very realistic thing. So for those of you in San Antonio, if you remember when we first got Tim Duncan and Stone Oak Parkway was literally a 2-lane highway going out to nowhere, Johnson City, and there was no businesses, there was no restaurants, there was no shopping centers or strip malls every other mile. That is Japan now, and it's not going the direction Stone Oak Parkway went. It's going in reverse. So imagine Stone Oak Parkway as it is now, and then we're going to start closing up the businesses, demolishing everything, getting rid of those homes. And going back to rural, yeah, that's Japan in a nutshell. They're slowly their population and their workforce doesn't have enough able bodies for the long haul. You can look at the Japanese birth rate compared to the American birth rate. All we're doing in the United States that as a teacher and educator is that we're playing shell games. We're closing off the high schools that are too small to keep fully staffed. We're shoving more kids into buildings, facilities that don't have the room to properly give them what they need as tools. And there's a lot of layers to it, but not the video, not the time. But I wanted to make the video so it'd be easier for you all to understand. So enjoy this. If you have more questions, post a comment. It's easier for me to talk about it than type it because Kat said if it's too long to read, he's not reading it, which defeats the point of the conversation in the first place. You can't give a simple answer to a very complex issue. So I hope this was long enough and short enough for your attention span. Y'all have a good one.